I just kind of wanted to go and explore the world and have an adventure. So I hit upon motorized paragliding. It was a really terrific tool for exploring. You can go to places no one's ever really been before. Downrange from the Chinese military rocket range. Favorite corridor for heroin smugglers. Dune's 600 feet tall, and once you get in, it's almost impossible to climb back out. I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. Tonight, I'd like to share with you my own personal journey. It's one that's taken me to every continent, and for the past 15 years, to fly over virtually every patch of sand on Earth. I grew up in Beverly Hills, and life up to that point had been pretty easy for me. And so I was looking for a challenge, and I hit upon the idea to go hitchhiking across Africa. And my friend Kurt Holzinger lent me his camera. We figured that I'd be seeing, bare-breasted women, people with plates in their lips, and the kind of stuff you see in National Geographic, and I should have a camera. But I didn't really know anything about photography. I just kind of wanted to go and explore the world and have an adventure. So that's what I did. And I got to the edge of Algiers by bus, and then I put my thumb out, and I had a French dictionary and a lot of chutzpah. I learned French, a little Arabic, a little Swahili along the way, and I also learned the 3 rules of hitchhiking, which are A, never to pay for a ride, 2, drink any water that comes out of a pipe, and 3, when you arrive in a village, walk around looking stupid, friendly, and non-threatening, and someone will take you in. And I didn't really know what I was doing with photography, but I felt like I started to kind of pretend that I was working for National Geographic. And so I went up into the Ruwenzori Mountains in Uganda, and I heard that there's a revolutionary movement, and so I sought out the king of the revolution. It's this guy in the leisure suit. And I had to wait a week to see this guy, and he gave me this long manifesto addressing members of the foreign press, which was only me. And when I got to Sudan, I got there, unfortunately, in the rainy season, and the only way across was to ride the train. I didn't have any rule of hitchhiking. I couldn't pay for a ticket, so I rode on the top of the train, which smelled a lot better on the inside of the train, but it had a drawback, is when you had to go to the toilet, you had about 5,000 people cheering for you. I spent 2.5 years hitchhiking around in Africa. But what I really wanted to do was to go and explore the world for the Geographic. And I started doing aerial photos by plane. And planes are great, they're very safe, but they're problematic in that you're flying kind of high, and the planes, a slow Cessna will fly maybe 60, 100 miles an hour, but things are going by pretty fast. And so even with the door off, you're limited by a plane, and I was getting pictures, but I was frustrated, and I wanted to find something better. So I hit upon motorized paragliding. If you look in this map, you'll see that there's, this is a volcanic crater. When I saw this, I thought, well, to get it, I'm going to have to get up really high, because if it's 8 miles across, I'm going to have to be really high and use a really wide-angle lens. And we had set up camp here, and I took off. It took me about an hour to get up to about 6,000 feet. And this is what I saw. So you can see on my altimeter, I'm 5,537 feet above takeoff and 7,473 feet maximum altitude. And with my little aircraft at the time, that was about as high as I could go. And this scared the hell out of me, being up this high. It's really nerve-wracking flying this high. So I found it's actually helpful to take pictures while you're flying, because it helps calm you down. You concentrate on something else besides dying. It was a really terrific tool for exploring. You can go to places no one's ever really been before, and that's quite extraordinary. It was also a great way to jolly up the locals. The kids thought it was fun, but the old people, they said, oh, these guys, he said, they want to die, but God has not chosen their time. But you get to really remote places. This is in northern Chad on the Libyan border, and this area had been mined when Libya invaded Chad, and hardly anybody had been into this valley. There were no tracks. There were a few goat herders, and you can find virgin terrain. You can fly over things and leave no trace. It's really quite a privilege to go and see a place that really nobody's ever seen before from the air. And one of the great things about my aircraft too is I can see things in kind of a different way. I mean, here you can see how the seasonal winds are pushing big fingers of sand into this salt lake. The lake here is saltier than seawater, And if you walked around around the palm trees, you could drink fresh water at your footprints. This is a really typical phenomenon. I saw these in salt lakes in almost every desert I went to, is the edge of the lakes, there'd be fresh water in your footprints, and the lakes were salty, sterile. And travel like this is not cheap. Generally, my trips cost about $1,000 a day, and that's for the honor of being able to sleep in the sand and eat bad food. You live and camp in places like this because the next morning you can go and see something like that. This is in central Chad. From there, you can see patterns. You can see the forces that shape the desert. You can understand it much better. You can also get pictures of people and wildlife that aren't running away from you. I spent about 5 or 6 flights trying to photograph camel caravans, and finally I was lucky, and when I was in the air, the caravans passed each other in opposite directions. This is going out to get salt in the Central Sahara in Niger. Towards the end of the trip, I was amazed that I'd actually been able to survive, that actually it was possible to fly this thing and not get hurt and get amazing pictures. So I started thinking about what it'd be like to take this aircraft to other parts of the world. And I hatched this idea to try, and maybe it would be interesting to photograph all the world's deserts. And the Sahara was really interesting, but what would it be like to take my aircraft to the Gobi or the Atacama or the empty Court of Arabia? So I started hatching the Grand Tour, and I thought I'd try and knock these deserts off one at a time. When I was researching the Sahara, I ran into a scientist in Berlin who had also been working out in the Gobi, and he told me about this area of the Gobi called the Wadi Njaran. It has the tallest sand dunes in the world, but most unusual are the dunes are separated by lakes. And I thought this was really weird, like why aren't the lakes filled up with sand? To get an area like this was really tricky. Physically it was difficult, but politically it was difficult too, because this is just downrange from the Chinese military rocket range. So to get permission, I signed a letter of agreement with the Chinese Academy of Science, a letter of agreement between the National Geographic Society and the CIS, and we hired 30 camels and 10 ponies to go out into the Wadi Njaran dunes, trying to solve the mystery of why these lakes weren't filled with sand. And most of the people we found out there were old people. The young people were required to go to school, and once they went to school, they decided they wanted a modern life. They didn't want to go back to chasing after goats. This is Juju, an old widow, and she was making us a pot of tea by boiling water in an old satellite dish covered in mirror fragments. That's that little hut, that's where she lives year-round, and she was really sweet. She gave us half of her bottle of whiskey the time we were there. Most people think of deserts as sandy areas, but most deserts are actually gravel plains. And Gobi actually means gravel plains in the local language, and here they're harvesting red pepper out in the plains. This is in the Qinghai Basin, which is between Tibet and the Taklamakan. It's about 8,000 feet. And another area of the Taklamakan where the rivers coming out of the Tanshan Mountains drain into the sand. This is me after a very bad morning of flying in the Taklamakan. I hit a tree on takeoff and got 17 stitches in my face. We fixed my motor and I went flying the next morning. After I did my travels in China, I decided to try my luck in Saudi Arabia. And the empty court of Saudi Arabia is this big patch of sand. This is the largest sand sea in the world. It's the size of France, Belgium, and Holland combined. It's an extremely dangerous place to go. Nobody goes in there. There's no point of potable water. There's no permanent habitation. And it's all sand, not a single rock out there. This is the empty quarter at sunrise. And the fog lasts in about 45 seconds. And as soon as the sun hit it, poof, it all evaporated. The red sand means it's extremely old, probably hundreds of thousands of years old, because it takes that long to oxidize that much sand. And to travel across it is very difficult and very dangerous. I mean, you can imagine that these dunes are about 600 feet tall, and most of the salt flats you're seeing here are bounded by slip faces of the dunes. So once you get in, it's almost impossible to climb back out. And if you burn a clutch or you break your transmission, you're really stuffed out there. That's why we have 3 cars. In a pinch, we could get out in 2 cars. In a real tight spot, we could all abandon all the gear and get out with 1 car. You have to be really careful of your water and your fuel. And to find interesting things to photograph out there, I relied on the satellite images this friend of mine at NASA had given me. Yellow is sand, and the purple and blue is the salt flats, the mud flats. Before I went, I spent weeks going through satellite images, kind of like looking at your carpet through a straw, because the resolution. I was trying to look for fine-scale features that were interesting to photograph. Sometimes you don't really understand what these satellite photos mean, but you start, you see where you are and what the photo looks like, and you get an idea of what might be interesting. And this was an area I thought might be worth exploring in Yemen. You see these migratory dunes. See the wind's moving this direction. See the dunes moving? And from the ground, you really have no idea what you're looking at. It's just kind of this lumpy ground, and you're kind of lost, but you get up and you can understand the shapes of things. And for human elements, you just have to go and spend time and talk to people and find things. This is a man who led his camels out to graze in the early morning on the edge of the empty quarter. And the other way we tried to get pictures was infrared cameras that were triggered by the animals coming to drink. And I set up an infrared beam across the edge of this little pond in Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument. And this is me testing out the camera. But anyway, set up, it's kind of like a photo booth, and everything that came down to drink, we got its picture. This is a barn owl. What we're really after, though, were mountain lions. And even the mountain lions will come down to drink and to hunt at the water holes. And after a week, we got a picture of this female. And this is her first picture, and then she was freaked out. She was trying to, where's that flash coming from? And she looked one way, and she looked another. And then, bingo, we got her picture. After the US had invaded both Afghanistan and Iraq, I thought it might be a good time to go to Iran. It's a beautiful country. It's a bit like Nevada on steroids. You have mountain ranges with big salt basins in between. And this was out in the Dashti Lut, another fascinating area. It's a dry lake, and it gets pounded by winds that come from just one direction. And the wind, it erodes these lumps in rows. It's a geological formation called Yardangs. You find these also on Mars. And it's a favorite corridor for heroin smugglers, which makes it a really difficult area to go to because you can't get a police escort because they're all afraid they're going to get shot. The penalty for heroin trafficking in Iran is death. And so if the heroin smuggler sees any vehicle out there, the first thing they'll do is shoot at it because they got nothing to lose. So we had a really hard time getting an escort, but we were able to go. When we got out there, we found these fantastic dunes. All the sand that had been blown out of those Yardangs got blown into these massive sand dunes on the Afghan border. This is Bam. It's one of the great ancient cities, and it was destroyed about 2 weeks after this picture was taken. They had a massive earthquake that killed thousands of people. It was the biggest piece of mud architecture in the world, and it was leveled. Never been rebuilt. So I got tired of Iran. I had a lot of trouble. I got arrested 3 times, and the 4th time we were about to get arrested. We had to flee the country. And so I got a little tired of the Middle East, and I decided it was time to go back to Africa. And Chris Johns, the editor of the magazine, gave me a wonderful job to photograph Africa. He wanted me to photograph all of Africa from the air. What kind of a great job is that? This is in Namibia. We put my aircraft and all this junk in the Cessna, and we would fly around and we'd see what we could get from the air. This is in Sossusvlei in Namibia from the plane. But you want to see wildlife, and the plane's too fast. We spotted these circles called fairy circles. They're kind of a mysterious formation that no one really understands. And it was in a wildlife preserve, and we saw some zebras. Thought, ooh, with my paraglider, I can probably herd the zebras into the fairy circles, and we get some great pictures. Plane, you can never do that. This is from the plane. These are living dunes of the Namib Desert. They get their water from morning fog. And this is the wreck of the Edouard Bolen. It was a ship that ran aground in 1909, so you can see how much the beach sand has accreted since 1909 in 100 years. And they have tremendous wildlife along the shores. There's the seal colony at Cape Fria. There are about 100,000 Cape fur seals there. And when I started flying down the beach, they all bolted for the water, so I had one go. And it was quite a stench. They all went, or. And I'm coming down low. You can see there's some seals in the background here that are still sleeping, and then they're starting to wake up when they hear the other ones running. And it's like pulling a zipper, and you go down the beach, and they all go into the water, and you get one shot at it for the day. This is in Algeria, a city called Gardaya. And when you're walking around Gardaya, you're going through these little narrow passageways. It's kind of a medieval city, and you have no idea what it looked like from above. And it gets so hot in the summer that they will sleep up on the roof, but they're very private, and they don't want people to see them when they're sleeping, so they have these kind of like walled-off rooftop dormitories. And we were in one of the oasis towns. We heard about a lost city out in the Great Western Sand Sea. And we spotted it on Google Earth, and we navigated out here through the dunes, and we flew over it, and it looked like that. They have another form of desert irrigation there called the Fougara. And these are underground aqueducts. And what looks to me like the Earth got attacked by a sewing machine are actually those are the clean-out holes of the Fougara. And we weren't able to get a permit to fly in this part of Algeria. It's a big problem for me is getting permits to fly. And in many parts of Africa, or in many parts of the world, it's just not possible. So you have to behave a bit like a thief or a spy to get your picture. Anyway, we were flying over the oasis, and I looked down, and I saw big green cars with large numbers on them, which is police cars, and they were following us. I thought, oh, shoot, what are we going to do? I was flying with my friend Francois, and so we both went up really high, like about 3,000 feet, and split different directions at sunset, and then we spiraled down to the ground, and then we came along at treetop level, and we landed right by our cars. It was time for a James Bond escape. So we left the cops over here in the town, and we landed here by the cars at dusk, threw all our stuff in there, and then went taking off out in the desert with we turned the headlights off, and we couldn't use the brakes because the cops might see the brake lights. And we got way out in the desert. We thought, oh God, we really got smart of those stupid cops. We thought we were really pretty sharp guys, until we drove off a cliff. And we went out the cliff. The car landed in its nose, and it kind of sat there in its nose for a while, trying to decide whether it was going to go over or not, and then it went back down. And while it was up in its nose, the seat came off the floor, and all the luggage in the back came falling down on top of us. But fortunately, it settled back in its tail, so the car landed back on the gas tank. And we had to figure out how to get, there's no 911. You're certainly not going to go call the cops. And Africans are incredible improvisers. These guys were terrific, and the car was amazing. It survived. So we had to figure out how we're going to get out. And we all had our different schemes, but anyway, this is what they did. This is on a moonless night. This is their 60-second exposures by starlight. So they took everything out of the car to make it lighter, and they took the spare tire and put it underneath the back tire, and they got the sand ladders out, dug a hole underneath the radiator, and they started to push. I got it off the sand, and miracle of miracles, it started. Deserts are not just hot environments, they're also the world's highest environments and the coldest environments. This is the dry valleys in Antarctica, the biggest ice-free area in Antarctica. Most people don't realize Antarctica is a desert. They just think it's a frozen wasteland, but it's a really beautiful desert environment. This is where glaciers come together as they head out to the sea. It's all the debris that was carved up by the glaciers. And the edge of the Ross Sea with permafrost. And these are the sand dunes of Antarctica. Frozen dunes. This is out in the salt flats of Bolivia. This is at 12,000 feet. It's the world's largest salt flat, and it's full of edible salt. And to fly there was quite challenging. This is 12,000 feet. We had to use a bigger wing and the most powerful paraglider motor available. But from the air, if you can take off, it's spectacular. On the edge of the salar, the salt flats, you get floods in the springtime. And these are 2 expedition cars going across about 6 inches of water across the salt flats on the edge. These are vicuña, endangered species, live on the edge of the salar. And this is up at 14,000 feet. This is really difficult flying. I had to be flying hands-free at 14,000 feet, about 30 feet above these birds. This is in the Himalaya, in Ladakh. It's a part of India that pokes up into the Himalaya. And while you have snow-capped peaks between the valleys themselves are hyper-arid deserts. Hardly get any rain at all. This is the headwaters of the Indus River. It comes out of Tibet and through Ladakh and then down into Pakistan. And you also find deserts in the lowest points in the world. This is the Dead Sea, 1,400 feet below sea level on the Jordanian side of the border. You get really strong winds coming out of Israel. They turn the salt water of the lake into a froth, and they blow it onto the shore, and it crystallizes. It's a nude beach on the Israeli side. A lot of people believe that bathing in waters of the Dead Sea is good for your skin. I got arrested for taking this picture. I get arrested a lot. And this is the second lowest place in the world. This is Lake Asale in Djibouti. This is about 1,000 feet below sea level. And the second saltiest body of water third saltiest body of water in the world. And this is Lake Asale in Ethiopia, also below sea level. And they have salt caravans, camel caravans that come in to harvest the salt and take it out. And I believe that's our last picture. Thank you all for coming tonight.